Namaste. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Saturday Live. Today's guest speaker is Puja Uchli. Puja is an engineer by education and an educator by passion. Uh, she has uh, she has the experience of setting up a school in Sikkim, and she has completed her certification in holistic education. Today, she'll be talking about creating a conducive environment for a child's growth and development. Okay, so let us hear it from Pooja. Let me add her. Welcome, Pooja.
Hi, Shraddha. Thank you so much for having me over. It's a
Yes.
pleasure. So,
So, yeah. So my first question for you today is, what do you mean by holistic education?
what do I mean by holistic education? So, holistic education as a concept has been there for a long time. I mean, if you think about it, formal education came just like a few hundred years ago, like only when the British came in and when formal education came. Look back to the time when gurukuls were there, when a child would go to a certain gurukul and learn under a certain guru. When we had the guru shishya relationship, at that time the child was not just studying subjects, it wasn't just academics, right? The child would go with the intention to become a better human being. So the intention of joining the Gurukul was not to get 80% or 90% marks, but to overall develop as a human being. And we've actually always had it in our culture. It's only when the formal schooling came about, when you talked about Lord Macaulay coming in and those infamous Macaulay minutes, which sort of reduced our education down to marks. So at that time, we would look at the whole child. We would look at the child in terms of his intellect. We would look at him in terms of his physical development and the social and emotional aspect. Is the child able to recognize his emotions? Is he able to express his emotions? How does he work with the community? Is he a social person? Is he able to interact with the community? When he comes out of the Gurukul, is he able to contribute to the community? And that was the purpose of a Gurukul. Now we have, reduced it down to, has the guy got 80% in the grade, in the boards? Is he able to, memorize information and bring it out very quickly? So holistic education is actually not really a new concept, but going back to what already was there, going back to our roots and talking about, are we addressing the whole child? So one of the elements I would say in holistic education is addressing the whole child. And this if you've heard of Maria Montessori, this is a concept that she also talks about. Like in Montessori education, they talk about developing the whole child. You talk about Gandhiji. Gandhiji had something called as Nai Talim. So Nai Talim is head, heart, and hand being in harmony, where the child is working with his hands and also working in harmony with his interests, with his passions, developing his values, his morals, and your head, where you have your cognitive skills. So, holistic education sort of takes all these elements. So, if a school says that I am a holistic school or I'm an alternative school, it doesn't have one set of philosophy. It's not like you say, I am the ICSE curriculum and I follow blah, blah, blah. A holistic school basically, or a holistic education basically says we are respecting this child for who he or she is. We are respecting this child as a human being, and what can we do to bring this child up as a good human being? How can we give him values? How can we create a citizen who wants to contribute to the community around him? So, in a nutshell, I think that is what I could give as, in my limited knowledge, what is holistic education. So, a lot of this also came from Bhumi College, right? When I did my certification of holistic education there, was the first time I came across these thoughts. And I tell you, I was mind blown that, there are such things that exist. And yet I look back at my own education And I think about how we sat in those tiny classrooms and just mugged information. Like, I used to hate history and geography because we had so many facts and figures. I had to remember when Shivaji Maharaj was born, I had to remember the date he went and attacked some fort. So there was just a lot of rote learning that happened, you know.
True.
Whereas now, when I look at history, you see all these movies, you read stories, and what else is history but stories? And now, when I look at the techniques that are available, there's role play, there's theater, there's puppetry, there's story writing, you know, getting the child to bring the story to a point and then say, what if you were this king, what would you do different? There's so many tools available, but at least in mainstream schools, I haven't seen it used that much. So one of the reasons I say went to Bhumi College was because of this. I was in Sikkim, right, and I was helping run the school. This was an existing school, and it was a conventional school. And
Okay.
I'd also seen a few other conventional schools nearby, and I noticed that they were doing the same thing that they were doing that happened during my education itself. Nothing had changed in so many years. These kids were learning things in the same way I learned it so many years ago. And I'm like, so much has changed. We've got computers, we've got laptops, we've got information at our fingertips. Why haven't learning techniques changed?
Changed.
So yeah, and so I wanted to learn what can we do different. And then I heard about Bhumi, and I said, okay, I must learn what is different. And so as a part of Bhumi,
So
we
Bhumi was in where is
Bangalore.
Bhumi situated? Bangalore. Okay.
Bhumi College is situated in Bangalore, and it was created with this intention. You know, Bhumi was created by Sita to bring in people like this who, feel that the mainstream education or the mainstream lifestyle is not working. Something is not working. We can't really put a finger on it, but something is not working, and we want to know what we can change about it. So it's a year of being exposed to alternative education in terms of I had taken up holistic education. There's also sustainable living, talking about an alternative way of living. How can we live in harmony with the earth? And I wanted to learn how to bring the children into this fold, you know, how to make children get such questions to recognize, you know, at that age when the child is like 5 year old and they have so many why questions. Why is it like this, miss? Why are you doing this? You know, why is this green? Why
Non-stop
is that?
vibes.
Yeah, non-stop whys. But it doesn't happen as we grow older, right? Suddenly those whys get buried somewhere. And yeah, so where do those whys go, and why do we not use it so much as adults? So that's, you know, even those are questions that we start thinking. We start thinking also, why did I stop asking those whys? I used to ask a lot of whys when I was 5 year old. What stops me now? And then we start thinking about, okay, society, you're thinking about what will they think of me, that she doesn't know even this much, and how society has made us that way, always afraid of what others will think. मैं ये बोलूंगी तो वो क्या सोचेंगे. So also to preserve that curiosity of a child, to preserve that inquisitiveness of a child, what can we do to, you know, do that? So that, I think Bhumi brought a lot of that within me, trying to get that, to recognize and celebrate that uniqueness of the child, the inquisitiveness, the curiosity. So, like, even when I was in the SHA school, the kids were crazy creative. And this is something I feel that the less resources a child has, the more creative they are. Like, it was a non-profit school for underprivileged children. So, the amount of toys we had were very limited. Like, you know, we would bring them out only in the evening for 1 hour, and then you get turns playing with it because there's only so many toys that we have. But they were in nature, right? It was in a beautiful place in Sikkim, in this really beautiful hill station. So the kids would collect stones and leaves and make beautiful things out of it and would play around with it. And the amount of creativity I saw over there, I realized I haven't really seen it with urban kids who are just surrounded by toys. So that's another thing that sort of clicked to me, that, yeah, and also the potential in these kids, right? Like kids in urban places versus kids in rural places, kids in high income versus low income, they're all the same. I mean, the potential within them is all the same. It was just a matter of, you providing that sort of an environment which is conducive for their growth. How do you create that sort of an environment is all that you need to do as a facilitator. And this is something that also came up in Bhumi. A sentence we frequently use is don't be a sage on the stage, but be a guide on the side. So you are not going up on the stage and telling the child, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. The child will do all of that. You just need to be, on the side saying that, oh, do you want this here? Or, do you want to try this out? Why don't you try it out and let me know what happens? And that's something that I noticed when I started visiting all these alternative schools. And there are a lot of alternative schools, which I wasn't aware of till I got into this whole field of education. Uh, there are schools where a child is recognized as an adult and treated as an adult. And that I feel is so important, treating the child as an adult. I remember when I was having a talk with some teachers of a conventional school, and we were talking about values. What are the values that the school should have? Or what, in your mind, is an ideal student? And a lot of the teachers said it should be someone who respects elders. Says good morning, good evening, thank you, miss, sorry, miss, etiquette. And I'm like, why is it only one way, this transaction? Why should the child only respect the adults? And isn't it a two-way street? And that's something I realized, yeah, in my school or just in the conventional platforms, that's usually the way it is. You're a child, you respect adults, but the respect is a two-way street. And that's another thing I noticed in alternative schools, that there was always dialogue. That's something I see the difference between conventional and alternative schools, that here it's a monologue. Here it's a teacher coming on the stage and giving a monologue, that today we are going to study blah blah blah, this is the concept, I have explained it to you, please note it down, questions will come from page number 4, line number 3. You know the drill.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, but then here in these alternative spaces, I saw it was a dialogue. It was more of a child coming with a question, and very often it was the adult replying with another question. Like, what do you think about it? And then the child starts thinking, and very often the answer actually used to come from the child only. And he was like, okay, you know what, Anna or uncle or whatever terminologies they're using over there, that Dada, I'll figure it out and I'll do this and I'll come back to you with the results. And I'm like, wow, that is so amazing that the child actually goes back, does his own research, and comes back with the answer. Whereas initially as a teacher, the minute I ask a question and the child doesn't have the right answer, within 2 seconds, I want to give the right answer. Then, nahi beta, ye galat hai. This is the right answer. Please note it down. Exam mein yahi likhna, okay? That's what we want to say. But when you hold yourself from saying that and give the child the chance to come up, it's beautiful. The child coming up with answers on their own. And when they come up with answers on their own, they almost always astonish you. Like, one of the things we did is we had started a small farm in the school. Like, we were like, land hai, chalo kuch grow karte hain. So we were like, we had put some carrots and cabbage and blah, blah, blah. Now, these kids obviously are expert farmers. I, from the city, have no idea what to do with a shovel. And this is where I see empowerment. The kids who till now were like always, miss, how to do this, how to do that, are suddenly very empowered because they can now tell me that, miss, you're holding that wrong. Usko aise nahi pakadte, aise it will not be able to break. Please put it like this. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine, sure. That feeling of empowerment is amazing. And when we give those kids that, oh, can you show me? And that changes the definition of a teacher, right? Like, a teacher doesn't have to be someone older than you. The teacher is just someone who has a particular skill and is sharing it with you. The child had a skill, which I didn't have, and the child was sharing it with me. So at that moment, the child was the teacher, I was the student. And that's all it is, right? It's just a sharing of knowledge. So it's not like, आप बड़े हो तो आप teacher हो, मैं छोटी हूँ तो मैं student हूँ. Not really. So I think that was also something that came to me, that when you give the child that empowerment, and later on, of course, when you start getting into theories and pedagogies, you realize that that's actually a pedagogy. Empowerment is one kind of pedagogy where you give the child this sort of a feeling of empowerment, like even the constant praise that you give, vagera, vagera. So there are theories, there is science that is available. A lot of us, I feel, know things through experience. Like, say, a parent with a child will know a lot of things because she or he is interacting with the child on a day to day basis. Now you supplement that with a little bit of science, with the theories that have been existing, with the tools that have been existing, and it helps you create that environment. There is experience, and then there is the science based theories that have, psychologists doing experiments for so many years, coming up with tools which can enhance learning. So I think complementing it is like a brilliant way to go. So that was another thing that came up. Yeah.
So, what all changes could you make when you were in that Sikkim school, SHA, right?
SHA. Okay. So when I was in SHA, it is a beautiful school to begin with. So the school had already been existing since 2003, I think, when I joined in 2017. It had already been there for quite some time. A few things that I brought in was one, experiential learning. And now this was before I joined Bhumi. So I really didn't have any tools on my hand, but you instinctively feel that you try something. I'd gone in to teach a lesson on Jammu Kashmir, and I realized the kids in Sikkim have no idea what Jammu Kashmir is. In the sense, you're living in this remote village, you just have seen it on a map, you very rarely have access to a TV or even videos. Like now kids have constant access to YouTube and they Google things, but in a remote village, kids really don't even know what is the meaning, have not seen the map of India and can place Jammu Kashmir. So all the words I were using was just words. It was almost like a Tare Zameen Par wala scene, that the words are just going over their head. So I realized, okay, Pooja, this is not working. You have to do something different. And I said, okay, let me start a project. And we did that. We got some cardboard. We made cutouts. I made some cutouts of little people with Kashmiri dresses. And we put a boat. We did this whole project. And I think it took us like 3 or 4 days. And kids who couldn't remember stuff after like 2 or 3 weeks of trying to drill the subject into them came up and were like, they would come during recess to me and they're like, Miss, Jammu Kashmir mein ye pehante na, Jammu Kashmir mein this is what they eat, no? And they had this newfound knowledge and they wanted to share it with everyone they could see. So they would go and tell random teachers also that, aisa aisa seekha hai. So I said, okay, this is interesting. So then we started doing different things. We started That's when I read about Montessori and I realized, oh, this is brilliant. So we started getting Montessori equipment. We fundraised and we created a library room. So we created a library, we brought in books, and there are so many books. There's Pratham. We got a lot of books from Pratham, a lot of donated books. And we created a library. We created it by levels of reading, and kids who would not be caught dead with a book. Initially they were like, books matlab padhai, and boys especially were like, we don't do this, we want to play cricket, we want to play football. But then they found books which interested them. Like this boy was really interested in space, and he found this book which had all the pictures of the planet, and he was like, anytime in the recess he's like, Miss, library kholo na, I want to go and sit in the library. So then we
Yeah.
created that space. Yeah, as that's when I realized, if you can just figure out what the child likes and then surround him with that, you can introduce any concept using that. Like using space, I could have done maths, I could have done even history. Like I put those figures on some random planet and talk about some king in some other planet, he would have been fascinated with it. So creating that environment And then later on, when I, of course, started studying about it, I realized, oh, setting up an environment is there is actually a method around it. It's one of the pedagogies that exist. And that's why it worked so well. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what happened. So creating that environment. So initially, the kindergarten classes used to be writing 1, 2, 3, writing ABC, and then we created this room and we brought the twister game. I don't know if you know about the twister game. It's like this mat which has colors on it, and then you like put your right hand on this color, put your left hand on this color. The kids learned colors like this, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. So we then started, we got a lot of resources like that donated. There were like a lot of foreign volunteers who came and brought these resources, and we put them around the room. And once in a day, we started Montessori time. So the kids, apart from their classes, would come to this place and just roll around. Like initially, it was all desks and benches in the classrooms. And then we brought them here where we put mats instead of desks and benches. And I said, oh, this is beautiful because the kids could roll around and, they were not stuck to one place. And asking a 5-year-old kid to sit in one place it's really torturous, for 40 minutes or even half an hour to expect a child to sit in one place and then shout at him because he's not sitting in one place. So then you bring about concepts like, the stages of development. At each age, what is the child actually physically capable of doing? Is he physically capable of holding a pencil, holding a crayon? What are fine motor skills? What are gross motor skills? At what age do we have to be enhancing what? So all these scientific theories then come about. So you bring this experience you have as a child, add these scientific based evidence, and something like they call accelerated learning. The learning happens much quicker. The kids are enjoying, we are enjoying it, and they pick up things so much quicker. You don't have to sit and char bar red likho, and you don't have to do that rote learning with them. They just learn it because now it's fun. So that happened. The rest of the work, of course, was more into making the school sustainable. So we were doing a lot of fundraising. We created a new library, like I said. We brought an audio room. So we started bringing in. We created an audio room. So we got a projector, and this was like the only projector in the village. So like all the villagers were very excited about having this huge projector, and we would have movies on it. So all the kids sitting around like a Saturday night, popcorn and movies sort of a thing, all cuddled up because it's cold. So they would bring all their blankets and all and sit around, and we would put movies. So a good way for them to learn English was we would have these English movies, cartoons as per the age group, sort of age appropriate. We would have those movies, and kids the next day then start talking about it. So again, you see a lot of language development without forcing it down your throat. So that happens. So yeah, these were some of the main things that we did in the school. And yeah,
Just to add to your point of the scientific way of making people understand, I
yeah,
had got once a WhatsApp message showing the hand of a 5-year-old and showing the hand of an adult. That why you
hmm.
should not force a child to write because the
Right.
hand is not yet developed, the bones are not yet grown that much to actually write with a pen. So don't force a child till the age of 6. Just to add to your.
Exactly. Yeah, I know exactly. I so this was something that I initially didn't know. I have also seen this image, as you said. And in the school, we had a problem because parents really want the child to come back with pages of ABCD written. So when you tell them that, they don't need, they're only 4 or 5 years old, like the KG, LKG, UKG kids, don't need to sit and write at this point. As long as they can identify and as long as they can even say it, that should be comfortable. But I think at that point of time, convincing the parents, because they're like, but baki school mein to likhte hai na, like everywhere else they're writing, coming back with loads of this. So those conversations with the parents are very necessary. Like with all this, I feel it's always having all the stakeholders on the same platform, like children, the teachers, the parents, as well as the school management, everyone understanding why we are doing what we are doing. Like instead of just saying ki nahi, the child will not write, but to explain that the child will not write at this age because his hand is not developed. That sort of then, oh, okay, because you're actually hurting the child by making him get into fine motor skills when his body is only physically developed for gross motor skills. So those sort of conversations I also think are important. Yeah, that is a good point you brought about. So yeah.
Yeah, you are the you founded Holistic Edu.
Yes.
So just tell me more about it.
Okay.
What all workshops do you do and how do you go about it?
Wonderful. I will. So I'll start about the journey of holistic edu. Like, I was telling you about the Sikkim school and then how I went to Bhumi College. So I saw all these alternative schools where all this amazing stuff was happening. And then I saw conventional schools, which, and the conventional schools, make up more than 80% of the actual number of schools running in India, say. The number of people who are able to afford an alternative school and the number because also the number of kids in each school will be much lesser. Like they don't take like 60 kids in a classroom, obviously, because that's not conducive for learning. So how do you get practices from such places and expose it to educators or parents or children in conventional schools? How do you let them know that this exists and you can also do it? So that's the vision behind Holistic Edu. I want to make holistic education accessible to every child or every parent and not just those who can afford those kind of fees. So that's like the vision. So coming from this, we created these workshops and we did one series of workshops for a school in Kerala. Uh, and the workshops talked about looking at the whole child development. So, in the terms of, are we having, like, they used to have a lot of assembly in the school. Every morning, you have a 1 hour assembly. And then we were like, is it necessary for them every day to have that? Can we have one day a circle time instead? Can the teachers and the children sit around in a circle and talk about their day, talk about their feelings, instead of every day going and we have one speech, one national anthem, one pledge, the whole thing, and then one
Thought for the day.
multiplication. Yeah,
Yeah.
thought for the day and multiplication table. This one child who comes and is like 2 2s are 4, 2 3s are 6. It happened at
Right.
my time and it's still happening now. It is still
Yeah.
happening now. So we were like, okay, because there's also the time crunch. You also want to finish curriculum. We were like one day or maybe twice in a week. And instead of that, can we have circle time? Can the teachers with their kids sit around in a circle and talk about their day? How are they feeling today? How has their week been? So introducing concept like circle time, like journaling, where does the child get a chance to express their emotions, register their emotions, even just, I am feeling sad. This happened to me at home today. So today I'm not in a good mood or I'm angry, or giving that sort of a space to the kids. So we did that. Another thing that I realized is when I came across the theory of multiple intelligence. Now this is a theory that's, it's not something like, reinventing the wheel. It's been there for quite some time. Howard Gardner made the theory many many years ago, and it's also a part, actually, if I'm not mistaken, of B.Ed, and teachers are supposed to know it. It doesn't seem to get implemented in classrooms though as much as it needs to. And also, I was wondering then about of parents having access to such sort of theories, like especially now with the time of the pandemic, where the parents have become like the educators as well in the home. Like I think students have classes for maybe 2 hours or 3 hours in a day, depending whatever each state's norm is and the age of the child. For the rest of the time, the parent is in charge of that child's development. So I had a workshop with parents on multiple intelligence theory, of the fact that there is not just one intelligence called IQ, but 8 types of intelligences, and talked about traits of it. And one of the parents in that workshop were like, oh, now I understand why my son is not able to sit for 40 minutes the way his sister does. The sister sits in time, she comes and sits in front of the computer. For 40 minutes, she's right there, does all her homework, and then says, Mama, can I go and play? But the son is just, all energy. He can't sit for 10 minutes. He keeps running here and there. He keeps shaking his leg. And she's like, oh, now I know he's a kinesthetic child. And now I can, accordingly do something for him,
Charge
create
his
activity,
energy. Yes.
channel his
Channelize
energy.
this energy. Yes.
Yeah, channelize the energy, and also maybe, you can also teach him using that, like the intelligence. If you say his dominant intelligence is his strength, using that intelligence to teach him theory, teach him new concepts. Like you want to teach him a concept, instead of making him write it down, if you can actually ask him to create something around it, use that energy, let him use his hands, because now he learns best when he's actually using his hands rather than writing it down. The daughter, in the other hand, may be a linguistic learner and learns best when she's using words, when she's reading text, when she's writing text. But the boy isn't. The text is just words that go in through one ear and come out through the other. So the parent can now change the approach of learning, using a different approach of learning for a different child. Rather than, we're so quick sometimes to put those labels on kids, no? He's such a stubborn kid. He doesn't sit in one place. He's so lazy. He's disobedient. Stuff like that, without getting into the core of the issue, that this is his strength. This is the way he works. So why don't we change around? And that's where we come into the whole child-centered learning. About changing your approach to suit the child's need instead of changing the child to suit your approach, which is what happens in a conventional school where you have like 30 or 30, 40. Now there are even 60 kids in a classroom, and you want to sort of mold all these kids to suit your approach. You're using one approach of linguistic teaching or logical mathematical teaching, and you want to change all of them to fit into your approach. Our answer sheets are, the text written, like long answers, short answers. So we want all of the children to be good in that. But each child is different. Someone is really good at expressing themselves through drawings. Someone can make a brilliant model of the same thing, but couldn't for the life of him write an essay about it. So even bringing that concept, like another thing that we do is the mind map workshops. And yeah, I shared a few pictures, right, with you of the
Yes.
kids who attended my mind map workshop. Now, this was the age group of 8 to 7 to 10. So, like these really tiny tots for the first time learning of an idea of mind maps, absolutely new concept. And it's like a 1.5 hours workshop. They come up with such beautiful mind maps. Very frankly, the kids' mind maps have been better than the adults. I've also held this workshop for adults, and I felt that the kids picked it up much more quicker, had more colorful. They were more, uh, they were more happy with using colors. We, over a period of time, have got so used to, the linear way of taking notes. When we did the same workshop for adults, everyone just had one blue pen and made the whole mind map with that one blue pen.
Okay.
And a lot of them also would make like one branch and then just note down everything in bullet points, because our brain has got so used to these bullet points now. Whereas kids, because their brain is still being molded at that point, and they love colors, right? They love really loud, colorful images. So they would go crazy. And the minute you tell them, yeah, you can use whatever color you want, they're over the moon. So they've made like such brilliant mind maps using just any concept. Like we did one, I think, on ice creams, right?
I have
Uh,
that.
yeah,
Can
if
you
you could
just share?
share those. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. This is Naren, right? So this one, Naren was, I think he's like a 9-year old, and he did this workshop. He did this mind map after we finished the workshop. Like we had done, we did ice cream, and then we did me, and then this child sat back after the workshop and did this beautiful thing, and then he sent it. Like he told his mom that, please send it, and I want her review or whatever. So he's done this whole thing of what defines Naren. So school, family, animals, and then got into dogs and cats. Then he talks about what type of dogs he likes, what type of cats he likes. So the creativity that comes out in the child when you let them really explore to their full potential. A lot of linear thinking, linear note taking restricts us, both children and adults. When we ask them to just note down points one below the other or ask them to write essays, we also restrict the amount their brain can move in different directions. Whereas when you see this mind map, it just goes on and on. he keeps adding points to it. Like each branch can go on to infinity. So yeah, this was Naren, and this was what he did after the workshop. This one was someone. Oh, this was also Naren. This was ice cream. This was the one that he did within the workshop, which amazed me. Like within that 1 hour workshop, he learned the concept of what a mind map is and actually created this on the spot. And he made this really colorful one, and they kept asking you, can I do more? And I'm like, yeah, if there's time, go ahead, do more. And they just keep on adding branches and branches and branches. And
And he
yeah,
was just 9 years
it's sorry.
old. He was just 9 years old.
Yeah, it it is. It is. This one, yeah, was Naren again. This was another kid. I don't remember who. This was a much smaller kid, but who also wanted to do, like, he looked at everyone else's and he also wanted to do a lot of it. He did this during the workshop itself. So he was like ice cream. So he said taste, and then he said yummy, and put them all on this workshop. So this was, I think, a 7-year-old. Yeah. And this was Harshini. Yeah, Harshini. Harshini was slightly older and she really got very fascinated with this. When I spoke to her mother, I think later on, she was saying that she also wants to take up her chapters like history or science and start putting those into mind maps. Like she just got so fascinated by the idea of a mind map that she wanted to take up her chapters from a textbook and started making mind maps of those chapters. So
Wow.
kids, yeah, kids take up to this concept really well, and which then got me thinking that when Tony Buzan created the mind map as a tool, it was I think 1980 or 1983. It's been so many years. I know very few schools which use this as a tool. Like I still have to like we've always grown up taking linear notes, right? We take notes with one single color pen, and we take it from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, starting from the left hand corner, ending at the right hand corner, right? It's when you think about it now, it's crazy why we do that. When you have something like this, you can put the whole chapter on just one page. It has taken me time to get out of my linear note taking and start doing mind maps, because my brain with so many years now has just got used to that method of I have to sort of like remind myself that no, Pooja, let's try mind maps, and I almost always realize it's a better tool. So I'm like, this should go to kids, the sooner the better. Like after 20 years down the line, then the child realizing that, oh, there was this and I wish I had used it. So why not use it while it's there? So yeah, that was there
I
more?
can see she has drawn two maps, or two flags, India and US.
Yeah, oh
Beside,
yeah, this she's from India, but she was in US. Like when she attended the workshops, she attended it from US. I think she shifted there, or her hometown is India and Vesa. So I think that was what it was. Yes. This is also a 7-year-old. I think Adit was 7 years old. All this is also something I think he did during the workshop. As we were teaching him, he made this mind map and he enjoyed it so much. Usually a very shy kid, which is what his father was telling me, that he's usually very shy on the camera and doesn't. But here he had so many questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? And they're very particular about using different colors. They'll never use the same color for all the branches. They love using different colors, making it and doodling, right? Like using images. If you see like above cycle, there's a doodle of a cycle. Now, this is a very important part of making a mind map, because your mind remembers images much better than text. Like if you see the thing where we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, it's a very
yes,
commonly used phrase, but there's so much of truth in it. Like you show someone an image, I show you an image, and even for 2 seconds, and I remove the image, I ask you what you remember about it. You can at least tell me 10 sentences about what you saw in the image. I give you a text, I give you 5 minutes to read it and remove it, and then ask you what do you remember about it. You barely will remember like 2 or 3 sentences. And that's the way our mind is. We remember visual images much better than text. especially if you're a visual learner. So using those visual images are so important. But still, when I did the same workshop with adults, I saw that adults wouldn't easily do this because we're not used to doing that. We're not used to making these doodles to remember. So it was all text in their mind maps. I had to, like, sort of say that maybe after the session gets over, go back and redo it and try and use images. So, like, there are all these tools that exist, and a lot of people have done a lot of research and created these tools. There's like learn how to learn, how to make learning more joyful, and how can we use these tools to make the child more creative, to increase his critical thinking, to even make learning more fun for him. Like, making a mind map is so much more interesting than just taking down notes from a chapter, like just the simple notes that we usually take when a teacher is talking. Instead of that, if you could do a mind map, you would just enjoy the process more. So that's also there. So yeah, those are then the kind of another workshop that we do is a workshop for parents called brain architecture. Now, this was something I came about. It's a study done by Harvard which talks about how early childhood experiences alter the physical structure of the brain. Not just about, I mean, the psychology and all, but when you actually take a physical structure of a brain and you talk about how neurons get together, and each time we have a negative experience, when the child in that early age of 0 to 8 has a negative experience, it actually makes the brain a little bit weaker. So there's a game we play called the brain game, in which we simulate making a brain, like joining the neurons together. So we join in pipe cleaners together to simulate that, and we talk about how the brain is formed. So it's a game where the parent then sees that, oh my god, this experience can actually, at the end of the game, if the brain is not built well, in the sense that if he's had really a lot of bad experiences, the brain collapses. And that physical experience of the brain just collapsing in front of you is very, it kind of really hits you hard. Instead of so much of a person telling you that negative experiences change brain structure, and the child later on in life is not able to withstand stress because during the early formative years these experiences have weakened his brain. So that was it. So that was the brain science workshop. Then in the multiple intelligence workshop, we walk the kids and the parents. Like the workshop that we do for the kids, we run them through the experiences, and then we sort of have this discussion with the child. Like, what type of learning are you most comfortable with? What type of learning do you feel enhances your learning process? And when we have these conversations, the kids then come up with things like, I prefer learning on my own. I don't like study groups. Like, if I have to learn something new, I take my book and I sit in one corner of my room and I read. And when there is a big group and everyone is talking at the same time, I can't concentrate. Very frankly, that's my style of learning. That's a intrapersonal style of learning. That's someone who wants to learn by themselves. That's someone who's not very comfortable with group settings. Like, say, interpersonal would be someone who loves group studies. Now, I have a friend who is like this. She's an interpersonal learner. The minute you bring up an idea, she would love to get a group together and brainstorm. Like, what do you think about this? And हम अलग क्या कर सकते हैं? And I sit in the group and, like, I need to go and study on my own. I need to formulate the ideas in my head, and then I will join your group and contribute. But I cannot get into the group directly. Now, these two people, me and my friend, have different personalities. Our dominant intelligence is different. She's an interpersonal learner. I'm an intrapersonal learner. As a parent or an educator, if you recognize that, then when you want to teach the child, you give them two different ways. Like, you're like, okay, Pooja, here is the information. Why don't you go and, take the next half an hour, read it, come to me with any doubts, and then we'll have a discussion on how to. Similarly, like I said, kinesthetic, right? If I know that Shraddha is a kinesthetic child, maybe, then I create like that. Instead of asking you to take a book and sit in one corner, I can teach you numbers by playing hopscotch. where we used to play that 1, 2, 3,
Yes,
and
yes.
I forgot what
Throw
you
a
call
stone
it.
and then, yeah,
Throw a
yeah, that is
stone and then you jump.
hopscotch.
That's
Yes.
hopscotch, right? Yeah. So I can start thinking in those terms because I know, say, Shraddha is a kinesthetic child and learns much better when she engages her whole body. So I won't ask her to sit in one corner of the room, give her a textbook, and ask her to solve the puzzles. I can do that with Puja because I know Puja likes to study on her own, and she likes, maybe, like, I like maths puzzles, and I've always liked maths puzzles. So I'm really happy if someone gives me a lot of puzzles and say, go and sit somewhere and solve it on your own. I don't want people giving answers to me. I want to do it on my own. So each person has a different way of doing things. uh yeah. So okay, so you're talking about multiple intelligence, right? 8 intelligences, like I spoke about. You have interpersonal, intrapersonal, which I was talking about, like me, who's more of a intrapersonal and would prefer solo time. I need time on my own to recharge my batteries also. Like, I find a large group a bit exhausting. Interpersonal would be someone who really loves being in groups and loves studying in group studies, would love to the tuition structure where you're teaching someone and people are learning from you. Best way to pick up for an interpersonal. He loves the fact that he's mentoring someone and someone is mentoring him. Linguistic is someone who is brilliant with words. Those ones who like, and this is me, okay, I like taking just one sentence and making an essay out of it. So school worked for me because I'm a linguistic learner, so I could write like these long essays. They would give you these 10 marks questions, and it worked for me because I just had to take a little bit of information and write 10 marks stuff. If you're not a linguistic learner, if you're not so good with words, this would have been a problem for you. For children who are not so linguistic, who could draw the whole thing, like who could make a brilliant drawing of a water chain, water cycle, and show it to you, but you ask them to write an essay about the water cycle and they struggle. So even while we are having the assessment, can we give them the freedom of choosing how they want to express it? Like, maybe I would like to write an essay about a water cycle, maybe someone else would like to draw the water cycle, some other child would like to can actually make a model of a water cycle, can stick cotton over there for clouds, can do an experiment and show you what condensation and evaporation is, stuff like that. So all these dominant intelligences can be used to process information and for the adults to assess information. Right now, we are using only linguistic and logical mathematical for assessing. You're either numeracy, where you're solving the maths puzzles, or you're writing long essays, you're writing. So, also giving the child those different ways of expression and assessing them based on that. You were also asking about why. Okay, so why I feel these science-based theories are necessary is because things like this, like the brain science development, the fact that a child has the largest amount of synapses. That's the formation of a synapse. Every time you learn something new, every time you touch something, when two neurons get together and pass information, that's a synapse. Now, this synapse is the highest during that age, the 0 to 8 years. That's when the maximum synapse forms. After that, you have something called as pruning, where the synapse breaks. So, if you look at it, your child at say 5 years has more number of synapses than I have at my age, because now the area of pruning has started happening. I'm not using certain synapses, and you have a phenomena known as use it or lose it, or pruning, in which those synapses are broken. Once I know this, I will make sure that I create more and more experiential learning experiences for my child to have the largest amount of synapse formation during those years.
Why does
When I
pruning happen? Why does
It's like,
pruning happen?
why does pruning happen? Okay, can you think of a skill that you picked up in your childhood that you now can no longer do? Okay, I was born in Tamil Nadu. Okay, so till class one, I was in Tamil Nadu, and apparently I knew Tamil really well. Really well, as in for a 1 year old, for a first standard kid, I knew it well. I came to Bombay, and I had no need to use it anymore. Then what happens after a time is a use it or lose it thing. I am not using it anymore, so the pathway breaks. Imagine,
Okay.
have you ever trekked in a forest?
Yes.
Like walked in a forest, these little paths that are formed because we walk on it, like no one's actually sat and made a path, but because people have continuously been using it,
Yes.
suddenly a path forms after a period of years. Now imagine for the next 10 years no one walks on the path. What's going to happen? The grass will grow back and the path
Yes.
doesn't exist anymore. The same thing happens to your synapses. You're not using it anymore, the path doesn't exist anymore. So that if you keep using it, the path becomes stronger and stronger, and then you can go from A to B. You can sit on a bicycle and you can ride it. You've picked up cycling for many, many years, you've not touched it at all. After 20 years, you decide कि अब मुझे करना है. There, so you can still learn. This is another thing also that needs to come up, that the brain is dynamic. Even now we are learning new things, new synapses are being formed, but the amount of effort it requires is much higher than it is for a child. For a child, the amount of effort is much lower. Like the amount of effort I'll need to put in to learn a new language will be this much, whereas if I had learned it when I was a small child, I could have done it with this much. So, also creating a multilingual environment for the child at that young age is beneficial, because science shows that synapses are formed at that young age, and it's much easier to pick up a language at that young age. So, this is where I'm talking about, when you know the science behind it and how it physically affects the brain architecture, it makes it much easier for the parent or the educator to understand why they must do what they must do. Like even for an educator, when we keep on saying that learning should be experiential, learning should be experiential, why? The more senses that are involved, the higher the retention of memory. The more I use my, which is why you remember the images, which is why when you see a mango, your mind goes to an experience you've had with a mango, maybe a mango milkshake that you really enjoyed, maybe a summer where you were, you can get the smell of the mango. When the minute I say the word mango, you'll get that smell. So those associations, our senses are so important, which is why we keep telling teachers that make sure that you involve more senses when you give the child an experience. Make sure it's a sensory experience, especially again at that age group, the 0 to 8 years. It's so important to have those sort of equipments. When you say rough, actually let him touch a rough surface so he knows what you're talking about. When you say hot, maybe he has some hot food and he's also smelling. So the more you can use sight and smell, all the five senses, and you create that experience, the retention is higher. And this is again, like I said, backed by science. The minute, and now for me this backed by science becomes very important, maybe because I'm a logical learner. I need the logic behind it. Like I'm like that even with say superstitions or things that people ask me to do, unless people tell me why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always ask why. Even if my mom or dad tell me कि Saturday को you should not cut your nails, I ask why. If I find it is logical, I obey it. Otherwise,
Exactly.
I
I know, exactly. I'm like that, right? If you give me a logic behind it, I'll remember it and I'll do it like properly on time and exactly. But if you're like, क्योंकि ऐसे कहते हैं बेटा, then that's it. The chances are one, I won't remember, and yeah, that's so. So that's where for me, I feel that having the science-based theories is also important for you to understand why you're doing it, and for you to be able to tell the child why you're asking them to do it. So having those conversations with a child also, that this helps you because, and presenting evidence to it is also important, rather than saying that do it because I said so, मैंने बोला तो करो. So that, and yeah, so mind maps, like I said, was also another thing where I felt and it's tried and tested, right? It's something that people have been doing for many, many years, and I've tried it myself, and I realized that, so someone in a recent workshop, we used maps for problem solving. So mind maps have many uses. You can use it for organizing your information, you can use it for solving problems, you can use it for brainstorming new ideas for storytelling. So we were doing it on an adult workshop, and one of the participants in the workshop had a problem. He wanted to say whether to keep a job or quit a job, or he had to make that sort of a decision.
That's what I
And we
wanted
said,
to know. How to use mind maps for problem solving also.
yeah, so that's there is a technique to it. There's a technique to it in which you create a mind maps, and how you create it, and you use a weighted average. You put a number to each thing, to the pros and the cons, and then you take an aggregate of the numbers. And also how, as you're doing it, so for him, as he was doing it, he got the answer. He actually didn't even reach to the numbers. I'm like, did you put ratings? He's like, I didn't have to do that. Even as I was doing it, I was like, okay, what are you doing? You know what the answer is. It's right there in front of you. And he made the decision. So it's, as a tool, I realized that its potential is so huge, and I'm like, why is it not being taught in schools? Why are we learning it now in like our late 30s? Or why didn't I learn it when I was 5 years old? I could have used it all my life. So tools like this, when they are existing, why is conventional education not using it? So that's where we said, okay, let's, can we do that? Can we bring awareness to things like that? So when I do a series called Wholesome Conversations, right? So Holistic Edu, we are there on Facebook, we are there on Instagram. I do a series called Holistic Wholesome Conversations, in which I talk to these people from alternative education fields. Like last time, like the today at 7 p.m., I'm having a conversation with an art teacher, and I have studied art from her, so I know she's brilliant. She does art workshops for children, where children explore themselves using art. They explore their feelings. They explore how there is art all around us. There are, so she's like, Pooja, everything around us is art. There are lines, there are spaces, there are dots. Just look around you, and everywhere you start looking, seeing these elements just surrounding you, and bringing these concepts. So it was a very funny thing. When I learned art from her, I was like the only adult. There was a kid in third standard, a kid in maybe 10th standard, and someone else in fifth. And then there was me. And I used to go after my engineering. After finishing office, I would go over there. And these kids would come up with such beautiful drawings. I was almost ashamed of my drawings, and I'm like, Bansuri, I'm like, look at this, a 5-year-old kid is doing better stuff, man. Because the kids at that age have amazing amount of creativity. She would ask them, like, what do you want to do? She would start with that. And the child would be like, I want a scientist to be doing an experiment underwater. And she's like, okay, do it. And then the child would actually do something like that. And I'm like, it's mind blowing. The amount of potential that is there in each child, if you have the right facilitator, or if any person gives that sort of right guidance to a child, the amount of creativity and everything, the potential that a child can be tapped is, it's mind blowing. So that's what holistic edu is about. We're trying to just bring those practices in front, and we're also trying to bring such people in front. I'm also trying to get such people on these platforms, so others, maybe parents, maybe educators from conventional institutes know that something like this exists, and perhaps we could start using it as well. So it's not so much about saying this is what you should do, yeah, this is right or that is wrong. We just saying this exists, these tools are there, these theories are there, and perhaps if you would like to take a look at it, you could use it to, help your child along. So yeah, that's what it's about. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful.
Um, uh, I'm just asking if any viewers have any questions, they can just type in.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
Anything else you would like to share?
Um, Not really. I would just maybe say that you can also check us out on Instagram and Facebook, holisticedu.in. And we are going to start a few master classes in which we are going to talk about these workshops. We're going to do a few workshops for both parents as well as children, and bring about topics like multiple intelligence. And yeah, do follow us and maybe attend those workshops too if you can. So yeah, that's
I just wish one day Holistic Edu expands to become an alternative school in itself, where
I do
yeah,
hope for that to happen. Yes, someday for sure it will.
yes,
I
artificial intelligence and mind mapping, all these tools, they are actually required these days, other
yeah
than the conventional schooling. So, hoping
yeah
for
I
that.
Yeah, I too. Maybe once this whole pandemic and the once schools actually start, then I would really love for this to become a reality for people, for children to be able to come into a space like this and just be, and also learn from different people who are like this, like storytellers, learn from visual artists, learn from theater artists, and to have that sort of a space. Yeah, that's somewhere down the pipeline. So,
So, yes, no questions as of now
all right.
from the viewers. So, I thank you for coming on the Homeschooling India platform and sharing your story. And hope to have more conversations with you
Yes,
in future.
thank you. Yeah, thanks, Shraddha. This has been so nice. I'm so glad we could have this conversation. And yeah, I'm so happy about the fact that, homeschooling has become a thing in India, and there are so many homeschoolers or unschoolers that are there now in India. It's wonderful. And I think, you guys are doing amazing stuff. So thanks for calling me on this platform.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Take care.